LeapSheep Startup Builder Live Q&A. This is the place for any startup founder to ask burning questions that are keeping you up at night and learn from our guest founders and startup support experts. And of course, LeapSheep's own startup building experts who have worked with hundreds of founders and their teams. Welcome, I'm your host today, Kirk Drage, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at LeapSheep. At LeapSheep, we're on a mission to flip the 95% failure rate by making expert and professional startup building guidance accessible, affordable for all founders. To founders, welcome if you've joined live. It's fantastic to have you here. The show is all about supporting you to get from idea to building a business model hypothesis that can get to product market fit, at least on paper, and then validate that it actually can in the real world before scaling up safely to avoid that 95% failure rate. Thank you to founders that have sent questions in before the show. Please drop any questions that you have during the show into the live stream comment section, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, and we'll get to those as we go through. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have both Hannah Hardy-Jones and Lucy Pink with us from Contended AI, a platform that transcribes conversations into meaningful content and insights. Having had their own startup prior to working together, they're now driven by a shared passion for improving lives using impactful technology. They have a wide range of customers globally, particularly in the financial planning and wealth management space, unlocking the value of their discussions with their clients. Recognized recently at the UN General Assembly, no less, as an impact-driven AI startup, Contended is committed to making every conversation count, empowering businesses to turn talk into transformative action. Hannah and Lucy, it's awesome to have you here. How's your year been so far?
Hello. Wow, it's been a massive start to the year, actually, hasn't it?
Yeah.
We actually got to have a break over the summer, which was the first time that we'd had some proper time off. Lucy went back to the UK, and we started kind of second week of January with some really exciting new clients. We brought on our first enterprise customer, which was amazing.
And how old is Contended now?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
that's super impressive that you guys have managed to have a break. 2 years into a startup is like usually completely manic, right?
Yeah, we we launched our actual SaaS product only 9 months ago. So previous to that, we were consulting, and so consulting and building and learning. So that first sort of summer break wasn't really a break, because we were just really sort of
working.
Yeah.
And this is exactly one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show, is because of the journey that you guys have had. Because we work with so many AI companies, and often starting off immediately as an AI product, you think you know what the customer wants. Often what the customer wants and what they're willing to pay for is quite different than what you think. And one of the ways to overcome that is to actually work as a consulting firm and do professional services to really understand the customer and then pivot into a product company. And that's exactly what you guys have done. So I'd love to hear more about, first of all, how did you guys get together? Because this is both your second startup, but you were separate before, is that right? And then you met. Can you tell us just a little bit of that backstory?
Yeah, totally. So we met at the Ministry of Awesome here in Christchurch, which is an incubation program, and our desks were pretty close to each other, so we ended up just becoming best friends, essentially, at that stage. And we were very different in how we kind of tackled our kind of respective startups. So I was quite product focused into sort of lean methodology in the sense of using it as a Bible, but I'd say probably a bit too much. I was probably less flexible and would kind of jump in and do user research, and probably spent a lot of time in that area because it ended up being quite a comfort, whereas Hannah was selling. So she was busy talking to people and making revenue, and probably maybe did less of the user research, but actually more of the learning and understanding business by revenue, whereas I did it by customer problem. And so I think,
that's really interesting. Is the difference there? You're talking about learning by selling as opposed to learning by talking. Is that kind of the difference?
Yeah, totally. And I think you can do as much research as you want, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't sell or if people aren't buying it, then you've got a problem too. 100%. And so I think we very quickly became buddies in the sense of sharing knowledge and understanding what we were doing. And I think when AI came to be, we then ended up being kind of consultants in that same sense of me learning and being able to build, because I am a software engineer at the same time, and Hannah being able to talk and understand and also sell and get paid for our services was how we kind of came to be. But that's
awesome. Yeah, so you've got that, sounds like you've got that complementary skill set, complementary personality types.
Yeah, I think we absolutely complement each other, and I think we struggled as solo founders because of, there was that some of those blind spots. So
totally.
I remember just being amazed at how much time Lucy would spend really deeply talking to these customers and going through this whole process of user research, whereas that was foreign to me because I built Kite based on my own passion and my own, perceived knowledge of the problem. And then I really could sell it well, but it wasn't a great product. And so I kind of had this view of like, well, if you just get people to start paying, then you can figure that out afterwards.
Yeah. Right.
And so, you think about like those two sides, like they fit perfectly together, but on their own, it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like the co-working space environment was really great for you guys to get to know each other and spend time together before you decided to leap into building a business together.
Yeah. I feel like we just feel very lucky. In this weird sense, we feel like it was all meant to be in a funny way. Like all of it was very organic. It wasn't like we were trying to hunt for a co-founder. It was essentially like me and Han loved working side by side. We knew kind of our lanes and where we wanted to be, but we thought, hey, let's just give this a go and see what happens. And it's just been kind of, I feel like a lot of people say that their co-founder relationship is not great, but this great thing, whereas me and Han, literally, we probably enjoy the journey just because we get to work side by side together. It's the best.
That's great. We were discussing earlier before we came on air the value of ecosystems and the community is something that you really need at that very early stage, isn't it? And you guys are a great testament to how valuable ecosystems are to get connected. But then you reach a certain stage where it's like, get out of the way, I'm building a business. I'm focused. I don't have time for community stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Watch that transition.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we actually moved from the startup space and we actually moved into a kind of a business environment where it was still co-working, but it was consultancies and, established businesses. So we didn't have those people they didn't have the same problems, but we learned from them and we felt like we'd sort of grown up, we'd sort of moved into the space. We were paying for our space rather than, in the co-working space, it was provided as part of the program. And so it was a really good stage for us. And then we actually then ended up moving into more of a startup co-working space, which we are now, because we moved back into that. We had a product and we were in that kind of scene again. So it was interesting, even just from an environment perspective, how that changed.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And the problem that you've eventually converged upon solving, can you share a little bit about your journey to how did you sort of start finding a problem space that you wanted to work in, and how did you start engaging with customers if you didn't know exactly what you wanted? Can you share a little bit about that backstory?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us was that we saw the power of AI in our own startups. That was step one. Like we just used it in every part of our business. We weren't thinking about it from a product perspective. It was just us. Then because people didn't know how to use the tools, we started training and consulting. And it really took time for us to even consider creating a product. Like it wasn't actually
wasn't front of mind.
Wasn't front of mind.
I think
at
we
all.
literally would say we will never build a product again.
Really?
Consulting. Yeah, because we'd spend our days working at legal firms and understanding their pain points, or commercial lighting companies where they'd need help with turning a specification document into a spreadsheet. So I would come in, build that pain point zapper. They're away laughing. We got to understand businesses quickly, but to get to that pain point zapper of product, we had to spend at least 6 months with them. And then saying that, we built custom, products too. So we weren't actually building scalable products. We were just building little add-ons, which is why AI is so great at. So we never said, here is a business, I want to use AI. Okay, here is a product you have to use. It's okay, let's learn your systems and let's build something quite bespoke, which will save you 10 hours a week. And for every company we worked with, it was different. So I'd say even at that point, we were still R&D. We were never actually building a scalable product. We were just kind of exposing ourselves to, especially for me as a software engineer, learning how to use AI and using LLMs and learning about how to pain points that, along with spending hours workshopping different pain points, understanding where companies are in their circle. Arguably, and I think we'll kind of probably say this more and more in the session, which is we probably wouldn't talk about AI in the first months of working with a business. For them, it was like more about pain points. And for us, if people wanted to use us because of AI, they ended up being the worst customer. So, we wanted to be able to help solve really big problems for these companies.
So, are you saying that you guys came together with an explicit view of not building a product company? You really just wanted to be consultant? Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, and for the first few months, honestly, the concept of getting paid for our work was pretty amazing. Like it was really, and like even when we look back at the start of it, like we would hardly charge anyone because it was even just like they're actually willing to pay for what we have to offer. I think deep down, or not deep down, but I think within us is the entrepreneurial side, and being a consultant isn't that. So I think it really was just a matter of time until we would have got a little bit antsy, that actually that's not us. But it was actually we were learning. Like we did treat it as the fact of like, what a privilege to go into a law firm, what a privilege to go into, a small business or a school and just talk to them about their whole workflow. And some of the things they'd talk about would be cultural things or, just workflow that had nothing to do with AI or technology, but we got to just immerse ourselves in it. And then as it went on, then we started uncovering similarities. We could find patterns in different ways of working. We were also learning about what wasn't working with AI tools. Like that was coming through really strongly. Yeah, right. And because we were consulting and we were at that time generally telling people how to use ChatGPT, we realized that we didn't want to be ChatGPT sales reps and that we knew we could build something that was actually going to really meet the needs of these customers. And that was like that tipping point of going like, we can actually solve this. Like we know these problems probably deeper than any of those other companies, It's like we really understood it.
So it's really interesting. We work with a lot of startups that have gone too far down the product. I've got an idea for a product, I'm building a product, but don't really understand the customer. And so the answer to, how do I sell, improve my sales, or how do I improve my customer retention is always go back and spend more time with the customer to understand the problem.
Totally.
But part of the challenge with doing that is it often feels like a box ticking exercise. Like, okay, we'll go talk to the customers if we have to, but can we get back to building the product?
And then also, if you're in that attitude, when you do talk to the customer, you're very quick to hear the compliments or hear the things that you want to confirm, and then you quickly go back. And I think one book that we read really early on was the Mum Test, which was recommended by a mentor. But essentially, it is the art of hearing, sort of not even talking about the product, talking about the problem as much as you can. And then I think the brutal reality sometimes can be actually the product you built might not actually be solving this need, and being open to that too, especially at the early stage where you're in this beautiful luxury of being able to rebuild. I think the scary thing is if you ended up carrying on with that same product and started to get potentially a couple more customers, paying customers, it's a lot harder to change your product when you've got a larger team. You're not that nimble process. So I think in those formative years, anything that pushes you to change the product, to ideate, is a blessing at that stage. And I think you've got to be open to doing that so early.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Your journey has really allowed you to be so authentic and passionate about the problem space because you decided not to be a product company.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if founders need to sort of channel that when they're going through this stage of their journey. And we use a model that we call the disruptive innovation journey. Let me just bring it up here, where the first stage of that journey is investment validation, which is building a pitch deck, looking at the competition. Are you using technologies that have underutilized and offer great potential? Stage B is then doing that user research and staying in that problem space. And I guess it's how you do user research that we talk a lot about. But it's wanting to stay there, as you say, and listen to what the customers are saying, and not just you're not just there to confirm what you already think. You actually genuinely want to hear the people have a different view, what language are they using, all those kind of things. And then spending time with them to figure out what kind of solutions would they want to adopt is an absolute key part of the process.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating to hear your journey, and knowing that you clearly, you understood startups, you understood what technology was, but you'd kind of put that on the shelf for a little while. That's absolutely fascinating.
And I think it's also around, I think about my first startup. So when I would talk to, and it was a mental health app for mums, how it started out, but I would talk to mums about very specific things that I wanted feedback on, but I didn't understand their whole life, like the holistic view of like, okay, cool. So this is this particular problem, but like who's involved? Where are you living? What's your budget? Like everything around it. And so then the outcome was building a product that didn't incorporate that holistic view. Whereas with Contented, we now, when we think about our customers, we understand so much about their business. It's not even just Contented. It's, like their team, their dynamics, the other technology that they use, their succession plan, like all these things that really matter. And I think the other side is, do they actually have money to pay for this product? And so when you do user research, often you get people going, that's incredible, that would solve all my problems, I would love that. And then you go, how much money do you have in a month to set aside to pay for this? And most of the time, honestly, if I had asked those questions, they would have gone, none. I've just cut Netflix, so why would I start paying for this app? And you miss that, and then that's my key to the whole
and this is where we have a very disciplined framework for teaching user research to overcome exactly these issues, because it doesn't matter how excited people are about the problem. It's where is that problem in the stack of problems that they've got to solve, and if it's too far down the list, they're just never going to get to it, and they're never going to put budget into it. And if you don't ask those kind of questions, you're just going to come away with very cold data.
I think in the B2B space too, a question that's really awesome for us is around vision for the company. We do work with leaders and CEOs and that more SLT team, and the question around vision, future, why you're passionate about your business is actually a huge indicator as to why they're a good fit with Contented. We work well with businesses who often there'll be quite a common theme where they'll be celebrating their 20th year or their 50th year. And it's because they want to keep on innovating and creating amazing things, whether it's their own product or service, whatever it is. But for us, that question has been enormous for us. And it's a question we probably would never have asked earlier, but to have somebody that's really keen on helping their team and helping their company get better, a simple question like that is actually hugely important. So if you're a startup, trying to find whatever that main question is really key, because it can kind of help with that sort of understanding quite quickly, especially as a team.
Yeah, it's an alignment of values, isn't it? It's what you guys are passionate about, is actually providing real outcomes and helping. And I think this is another challenge that we have in the startup spaces. There's been a lot of companies that we've seen come before us that have been incredibly successful on a global scale that actually haven't really cared about customer outcomes. They've been able to throw a product that's just better than alternatives, and the customers have figured out how to get some value out of it. But the company hasn't had to go to the point of figuring out, well, what do the companies actually do with it, and do they get value out of it? But I think that's really starting to shift, where those big platform opportunities where you can just throw some technology and hope the customer gets an outcome, those are disappearing. And so you have to be more passionate about the customer's problem and getting an outcome. I love Alex Hormozi's term, what's the customer's dream outcome? Do you know what it is? Can you articulate it? Can you have a conversation about it? I think that's when you know you're heading in the right direction. And it sounds exactly what you guys are
And a tangible thing you can also do is change your pricing to usage based. So also understanding, and we're seeing that time and time again with SaaS products, is moving away from it's going to cost you $500 a month for XYZ. It's actually, this is why, this is the usage base. And as soon as we did that, I think that's where we also see, if a user isn't getting, so for us, it's hours uploaded into Contented because we deal with voice data. And, if a customer is only putting in 5 hours, it's a very quick way to see that actually they're not getting as much value or potentially not. So I think usage-based pricing will appear more and more.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's even a stepping stone to outcome-based pricing, which is they're putting data into the system, but then what are they expecting to get out of it? If they're, in your case, if they're writing articles that's going to go in the local newspaper, how many articles are they getting out? What are the quality of those articles? Those kind of things. I think that's the trend that we're seeing in the SaaS space, I think.
And we've got some, and I think the only way we've really done that is by calling up users all the time. So I think one of my favorite stories is when we called up a random user in New York who was thrashing Contented, like going ham. And we were like, what are you doing? We want to know. How are you using it? What are you doing? Let us know. And anyway, he's an engineer by trade, but he's so passionate about this issue of news deserts in the US. There's just a lot of top-heavy mainstream news, and actually local news agencies are crumbling at the moment. So he was keen at kind of taking council meetings and transforming them into local news. So he was doing that, but also he found this amazing revenue opportunity, which is selling his articles to state newspapers. And he was saying that actually ended up being on the front page of the state newspaper, and he got paid, $1,000 for this. So he's ultimately turned that into his own opportunity, and he is still to this day an incredible user. But we would never in our wildest dreams thought anyone was using Contented in that way. So it was an incredible learning for us to see what value looks like for different people around the world.
That's amazing. And what you're describing there is a customer success role. And we talked earlier about you've got Mixpanel implemented, so you see usage of the product, and now you're getting on the phone and talking to customers. How do you guys? Sorry, this is a completely unscripted question, but how do you guys sort of think about that customer success role? Do you sort of formally think about it in terms of customer success, or is it just something that you do and you don't really think about it?
We do customer success currently, and Mixpanel definitely, I think for us, is great at learning and understanding, even associating it with cost. So Mixpanel plus our financial reporting equals an incredibly amazing analysis of Contented now. So we can kind of see the cost per user, how much they're using it, what does that look like. So Mixpanel has opened our eyes to user journeys, how people are using it. And then often if we start to see somebody doing something quite ramping up, we'll often hop on the phone to ask, how are you doing it? Tell us about your journey. Still to this day, I think you can throw as much tech and you can get as much, as many metrics as possible about your users, but nothing comes close to picking up the phone or talking to users. And, we'll see users using Contented all the time. And I think that's something we're most proud of and we'll put as our, in our dashboard.
Yeah, I think that's gold. Picking up the phone, as you say, the quality of the conversation that you can have is just so much deeper than anything you can get from surveys or any kind of statistics that come with data.
And I think Hannah will say this, is it's crazy. You will talk to a customer who you see using Contented all the time, but when they talk to you about examples and the context, it kind of just, it blows it out of its water.
Yeah, and I think we really also take, when we use Intercom, for example, but we answer that ourselves. Like often it is just like, hey, it's Hannah, or, and just being able to be really available to that. And the enterprise customer that we recently brought on board, they have an external provider that does all of their ticketing and support, ticketing for all their other tech. And so they wanted to do the same for Contented. And we've said actually the best thing to do is actually for that to come through us to start with. Like if we get a whole heap of support requests, then at least we know really quickly there's something not working.
Totally.
And so doing things like that, and even onboarding from like setting it up from a success perspective, is making sure that our onboarding with super users and teams is so great that they're such champions that makes that super successful. So the champions within the teams that we have, the business clients, are incredible. Like they are, it's just probably like having us there championing it, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, everything we're talking about is such a good example of, you know, doing things manually that don't scale. Because a lot of things that you're talking about, you could easily say, well, that's not very efficient. Let's figure out ways to do that more efficiently with technology and make it self-service and etc. It's also being incredibly customer-centric and really curious about the problem space. And I think these are two big gaps that we see in startups in this early stage, is not doing enough of those two things. And I think your journey is a great example of doing those things right, which is, you know, it's fabulous.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be a tipping point, obviously. Like we get to the point of, you know, we've got 1,000 customers that becomes hard, but we also know what good looks like manually, and then you can turn that into a more automated flow because you really understand.
We've got high standards too. And so I think what we've found is we have tried to automate a couple of things. And then, do you know, we had this realization just a couple of days ago when we had the opportunity to automate a couple of things. And we do have automations internally, but we've realized actually we enjoy that part of the journey. We're not on this journey for that long. You know, life's pretty short. Actually, let's extend this. Like if this actually provides us happiness, if jumping on the phone and onboarding customers provides us happiness at this stage while we can, let's just not. And let's not complicate it. And I think for us, one thing we're going to be really excited for is a VA. I think we do have a couple of things, and still bringing on a human too, because there is so much that goes on with us that actually trying to automate it without having the human there is actually a lot more trickier. So we're curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's that human led, we call the founder-led selling, founder-led product management, founder-led customer success. You get to a point that sounds like where you guys are at the moment, where you've sort of reached your maximum capacity, and you've got to figure out how to scale, and that's where those VA kind of resources and a little bit of tech maybe to help with the admin, so that you guys can spend more time doing that until you're forced to take the next step, which is get other people involved.
But I think and I don't want us to sound like we're perfectionists too, and we're doing this perfect way of building a startup. I do think a lot of it has come from our previous startups too. Like, I think we failed upwards in that sense. Like, and I think we still fail with so many other things, but I think learning fast and failing upwards is a huge part of what we do here at Contented. And I think that's something I also want to kind of put forward, is while we sound like we're these perfect humans that are going into enterprise, and we love, like, we will go and do office hours and actually put ourselves in our enterprise customers' like offices. We'll literally sit there, and if somebody has an issue, we will be there in person. We will go out of our way to do that. But we've learnt this the hard way, because one other customer we didn't do that with. So we're like, this time we're going to do it. So I think being open to that is really key, and knowing where your weaknesses lie and then very quickly acting on it, because you are the owners of this business. So we get to do that and learn quickly.
Yeah, that's a great tip I just wanted to call out, is actually going and sitting on site in your customer. If you're a B2B startup, that is absolutely gold. I learned that lesson when I was in Silicon Valley, and you just learn so much more about their business and the context, and and they tell you how they think about your company, because you're there. You're sort of part of the team.
And we've only just started doing that, and we're seeing huge benefits. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. There's a couple of sort of follow-on questions. I wanted to talk a little bit about accelerator programs and when's the right time to do those, because you've got this amazing sort of background experience, as you've said, that sort of led you to be able to do what you're doing now, because you had that previous experience. But before I go there, one question I wanted to ask you that we have a lot of founders that are worried about is, if you don't have a product yet, how do you talk to customers? The belief that we're dealing with all the time with founders is, I need a product before I can go talk to a customer. Can you talk about that, and how did you find your first customers if you don't have a product? How did you have the credibility to talk to customers when you're just starting a new business and you weren't previously consultants because you had previous startups? Like, how did that work?
The biggest thing that we've learned is talking to as many people as possible, like getting yourself into situations where you're having organic conversations. So whether that's going to a networking event and just like being really open and asking questions, because I think the really common thing, and I definitely used to be like this, which is automatically just going into sales mode. Like, got this idea, and you're just sort of vomiting all of this out without actually just going like, if it was, we were talking to you, you just go like, Kirk, tell me about what you do. Why do you do what you do? And what are some of the things that you have going on that are challenges? And you just have an actual conversation. Maybe do it to someone on a plane that you're sitting next to, and just get used to actually asking questions in a genuine way and not trying to sell something. And it really doesn't matter. Like, you don't need to talk about anything to do with what you're building or your ideas. You're literally just sponging up everything about them.
Make it all about
and then
them,
go
right?
find more people like that. Maybe that person has this problem. Okay, well, where are those other people with problems going to be? Maybe it's at a networking event, or one of the things that we've done is come up with experiments just to get in front of people. So one of mine was having 70 coffee dates in 6 weeks, and just putting it out on LinkedIn, like, I'm doing this experiment, does anyone want to be involved with it? And you draw out
That's great.
people who just actually want to connect, and then you learn so much from. And I think that's probably the biggest advice, is it's
and post it as research. I'd say for people that maybe aren't as extroverted as Han, in terms of like putting yourself out there, like, just make it a research question. Like, pretend that you're just trying to understand a hypothesis, and you could potentially start to think about it if you find someone saying, hey, these are my problems within, and also be very specific in the space that you're working in. So for example, if you don't have an idea, it's not like, you look at Meta, Facebook, Spotify, you think that they, like, in the shower, they had this like genius idea. It's usually because they're in that profession, or they've been an engineer, or they can kind of see a combination of two epic technologies coming together. It's usually something along those lines. And I think, taking it away, being less glamorous, maybe being a HR professional that's found an issue with XYZ, maybe it's something else, and then talking to the same type of person and seeing if they have that issue. And if they don't, then probably learn from that too, but also pose it as research, and then kind of capture those thoughts and problems and going, okay, if you could build something that solves that takes it to that step, but then you have to go, but then will they pay for that? Like, how much of a problem is it? Is it burning the house down problem? And if it's not a burning the house down problem, that's when it's a tricky one too. So there's a couple of gates, but that's not to say you can't get there too. It just takes time. And I think time is something that is scary for an entrepreneur. And I think we were really lucky with an early mentor that you would talk about your problem, and he would look at you straight in the face and go, I think you've got 6 months more in this space. I don't think you know enough. And it's the most humbling but perfect thing to say to anyone, because it kind of goes, oh shit, I've actually got to go back in and understand more. So I think time feels stressful, but actually it's the best thing for you too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a couple of takeaways there is the volume of conversations. When you're at this very early stage, I think a key metric, I'm big on metrics, that founders can give themselves is that volume of conversations. The more conversations you're having, the more you're learning. And what are customers or potential customers? They're not even customers at this point because you don't have a product. But what do people regard as good conversations? Someone said this to me a little while ago. It's generally a conversation where they get to talk about themselves.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they reflect back and go, I really enjoyed talking to Hannah because she asked me all these questions that I got to tell her all the things that I love. And that's what people generally think is a really good conversation. And I think, Hannah, to your point, if you can get them talking about their issues and their challenges, and you can do that in a really human friendly way where you're not pushing or selling, or you're just genuinely interested in, their visions and their challenges and their and so forth. That's what's going to lead to really interesting conversations with people that go, I enjoyed this time and I actually want to have a chat with you again. When can we catch up next? I think that's a good signal that you've had a good conversation, right? And so the more conversations you can have, and then Lucy, to your point around, there's no point having conversations about 50 different things. You've got to be having conversations that relate to something similar, so you can begin to see patterns. Because this is a pattern recognition exercise. This is what these discussions are all about. So you've got to, if you don't immediately have a at some point pretty soon, you've got to have some sort of hypothesis around, okay, there's a problem with this industry, or there's a problem with this particular business process that's a horizontal process, like, you know, sales or finance or whatever, or there's an opportunity with this technology. And it's that combination of discussions and that hypothesis where you can have those similar types of conversations to recognize patterns. That's what's really going to unlock the opportunities.
Yeah, and I think also trying not to think about people that you could partner with. Like, I think this is a really like common thing, is you think you've got a problem, you can then create a product, and then you go, it'd be really great because if we partnered with all the banks, for example, that could really get, you know, a huge amount of traction. And so it's really easy to kind of veer away from the customer and start thinking about distribution. And then I'll just have a whole heap of meetings with banks. And I mean, I remember going with Kite. I got invited to talk at Parliament with one of the MPs about Kite, and it's the biggest waste of time. Like, that was an ego.
You guys are a goldmine. This is so cool. There's like all the ways that you can poorly spend time in a startup. You're taking it through, which is great.
I think it's that, you know, there's some things that are good for your ego at the start. So connecting with perceived important people, or being asked to speak in certain events that actually is nothing to do with the problem or what you might be building. And so like, it's quite, you have to be, I think now we know, like, to be really strict with that. Like, what are you actually, is that going to move anything? Is that going to gain any more insight? And, you know, yes, it might be a good photo, but that's not
as far as it goes.
Yeah.
And also, I think, like, going back to Hannah's point about the media and news, I remember when my previous startup, On You, was in the newspaper, and it was huge. Like, we got, like, our traffic was insane, and I was just on cloud 9. And then I just had this brutal reality of none of these are qualified leads. Like, you know, it's all vanity metrics. And so trying to actually understand who actually might be a lead here or might be a paying user was actually a nightmare. And it actually mucked up all of my good analytics I had prior. But it's just an interesting case where you kind of go, actually, media is good for something, and it could be good for brand, or it could be good for XYZ, but very quickly learning and understanding what part of the marketing, sales, or who you're reaching out to, or what conference, where it sits, and the reasons why for it, is quite a hard lesson to quickly learn, but one that I think every startup founder has to go through.
100%. Yeah. Wow. You guys have got such great stories. Can I ask you, how did you get your first customer engagement? What was did they ask you? Did you have to pitch? How did that happen?
Contented. I mean, from a consulting perspective, that was just targeting people that we knew. So, for example, our very first paying customer was the school that my kids went to, because I was like, we could talk to the teachers. So that was kind of like that step of going, like, immediate network and knowing the people that do have the problem. Like, I knew that the principal had been talking about, you know, being able to use technology to help, you know, with the burnout of their teachers. So that was kind of that step, and that was very much word of mouth. Within Christchurch, we actually got quite a lot of business then through Business Canterbury, who are the Chamber of Commerce here. So kind of finding customers that can influence other customers, I think, was really key for us. And thinking about it that way, and they were a paying customer. When it came time for us actually to build product, that came through our network of consulting. So we knew we almost could create this list of everyone that we had done some consulting or workshops for, who have the biggest problems, and then kind of going back to them to going, hey, you know how we talked about these problems that you had? Well, we could actually create something pretty affordable for you that would solve that. And then that was, you know, a huge win. And then it just cascaded from there, really, because word of mouth for us is huge. It's just beyond. I mean, our customers do demos for potential customers. Like, they are our pseudo salespeople, you know. So that was kind of, I think, really came from that journey, though, of, you know, being able to build.
Spending time with people, figuring out what the problems are. Yeah. Again, you guys have got such a great story here. It's that leveraging people that you know, because the biggest barrier to having a transaction with a potential customer is trust and credibility. And so you start off with people that you know, we've already got that trust and credibility. That makes life a lot easier. And then when you meet people at arm's length, you can say, well, I've already now got customers and I've worked with someone, I can introduce you to those. So yeah, you guys have got such a great story. I'd love to switch gears and actually talk about your product and what problem you're solving and how that product development sort of journey came about. Can you talk a little bit more about what Contented is and what problem it solves and how you sort of landed on it being a product?
I think like Hans mentioned before, we used to build a lot of custom products. So we would never, so for example, with Business Canterbury, the Chamber of Commerce here in Christchurch, their main issue was around kind of being able to sweat conversations that they're having within their company into content. So we worked really closely with the comms manager, Tate, to learn about the types of speaking engagements they're doing and the different types of content that they wanted to create afterwards. And this was based on past behavior. So we'd probably spent most of our time with Tate going, hey, what do you already create? And where does that come from? So a really good example of that workspace was there was some comms around a policy, or Leanne was talking about it on the phone. Tate recorded it. He put it through the Contented workspace and was able to create a PR release, some comms for small businesses in Christchurch, internal comms to update staff on the new policy change, all within just one conversation. So being able to look at a conversation not just as meetings, but actually valuable data that could convert into amazing content. So that was our first ever voice related workspace. Prior to that, we were building workspaces that use computer vision. We were building very bespokely and building very well, and we've since then kind of had no churn because we built so bespokely. The step change was when we ended up kind of going, cool, we're getting so many requests for voice-based workspaces. So we started working with Prime Strategies, who is, they're a consultancy with multiple consultants who are doing a lot of client-facing conversations. With those client-facing discovery calls, they needed internal CRM content, but they needed proposals and updates. So they just got Contented so quickly and just fell in love. And then we thought, actually, how could we transfer this not to be bespoke? So we were charging a setup fee plus a subscription for the technology. Can we transfer this into a SaaS product? And that was when the magic happened. We started to see people signing up, using the tool and paying for it. And I think, and a lot of them were strangers too. And a lot of them, like we mentioned before, were news agencies in the US. Like we really had random people kind of coming across us and starting to use that. And it all centers around that pain point of they're having incredible conversations. There is a lot of rich data. These are technical conversations. These could be 6-hour council meetings, or they could be music, on the beach. But those thoughts and ideas are so important that we could sweat that into incredible insights and analysis. And they couldn't do that with an Otter or a Fathom or any of these more sort of linear.
Meeting focused.
Yeah. That was kind of the pain point, which is that knowledge sharing, being able to create amazing content and internal content. And so that's where our product is now today, which was voice-based kind of an AI platform.
That's awesome. And when you decided to move into the SaaS space, and you mentioned you started to get customers to sign up, what marketing approaches were you using at that point in time to let the world know that you existed?
Zero marketing at that point. I would say, though, it was word of mouth. So it was somebody like Business Canterbury had already used their voice-based workspace. So they would talk about us. And very quickly in Christchurch, it kind of came a hot spot for using Contented, trialing it and paying for it. But Hannah, you were still at the same time, you've got to remember, Hannah was doing her coffee dates. I was doing user research. So those people were turning into customers too. So alongside that research, there was an organic progression into just trialing Contented because it was part of an affiliation of who we were. So that was a kind of a key point too.
And I think one thing that we also, I think is really important is from a visibility perspective. So we use LinkedIn as our main way of kind of communicating with customers, is having a business like the Contented LinkedIn, and we were doing a Contented newsletter at that time. So very kind of, contented product focused, and then someone in the team, and it's me in this case, is having someone who is visible but not so much about product. So like, for example, for me, if I talk about product on my posts, the engagement is low. If I talk about something that's happening in the world or a viewpoint, then, you know, but that's also part of building that trust, because you've got then people knowing about Contented, you've got people then knowing about, you know, something more personal around us, either one of us as co-founders, and kind of keeping that going. But I think people a lot of the time use LinkedIn to sell, and it falls flat because it's not authentic. Yeah.
And it's not helping. Great marketing is helping, and you know, if you're helping people by talking about things that they care about and not pushing your product. So, you know, again, there's you know, such great, you know, what I love about talking to founders like you guys is your story is a story that other people can follow. You've got things that you've done are things that other people can do. You listen to like the Mark Zuckerberg story. It's like, it's a great story, but it's not something that I can take on board and follow to build my startup, right? But everything that you've done that we've talked about today are things that any founder can do if they want to play in the B2B space. Then all the approaches that you've taken are totally things that any founder can do, which is what I love about your journey so much. And you know, the capital efficiency, which is, you know, one of my favorite things in the investment world that we're really bad at in VC and in the investment space is capital efficiency. Because investors are quite happy for founders to spend a lot of money until you get the kind of metrics that they're looking for and you become interesting to them. And so we just see an incredible waste of time and capital before founders sort of get to that point. And even when they get to that point, they start chasing growth rather than actually truly understanding what the users want and building great products. It's a whole nother story. But you know, what you've done is you know, exactly what we advocate for, which is, you know, no paid marketing. You don't buy advertisements at the stage of the company that you guys are at. There's no online marketing campaigns at the stage that you guys are at. It's mostly manual, working one-on-one to create a great product experience that customers love and start talking about. We talk about the milestone of creating advocates, fans and advocates. So a customer is someone that pays you, a fan is someone that loves your product and will give you a good rating, but an advocate is somebody that will proactively tell other people about you. And that's the level of quality that we advocate that founders need to get to before they start thinking about doing anything that tries to scale. And it sounds like exactly what you guys have done. It's so incredibly exciting to hear about your story and your success on that journey. And now you've got people coming to you that you don't even know because you're getting these advocates that are telling them you've got to use Contented. Yeah. That must be super satisfying.
I think also having a big vision, like we don't share our vision too often, but I think that's why it's really important to have a really special kind of dynamic co-founder relationship, especially in our team as well. Is, you know, I remember really early on with On You, my first startup, I remember being pushed to pitch to VCs when I had no clue where I was going and what I was up to. I was still doing user research, and they would tout, what is your 5-year, 10-year vision? And I remember the sort of push was to kind of make it up somewhat, you know, like just kind of make it up. You can kind of figure it out and then reverse engineer.
Make it to make it.
Totally. And for us, I think the crazy thing is our vision is so crystal clear. Like we can see Contented in a really sort of amazing way now that we could happily do the 5-year, 10-year vision now, because there is so much room for innovation within Contented, from doing all of that user research, from staying close. There is actually far too much innovation, you know, like to push forward. Yeah. And so for us, it's like, wow, you can actually start to see a 5-year journey with Contented because there is so much room for us to grow. And I think that has only happened in the last 9 months, I reckon. But saying that, I would argue when we first started building Contented, the SaaS product, that vision has stayed the same since. And it's something that I think just because we were so exposed to AI and talking to incredible advisors, we've got Peter over in the US, who was a VP at Microsoft. You know, he retired early, and I remember when he first met us, he said he felt like he'd missed out on this crazy wave, like he retired too early because AI jumped onto the scene. But when we started to talk about our vision for Contented with him, he then felt like he was finally back on that wave. And for us, we want a team to join in on that too. So I think we're really lucky to have such a vision together, because that's kind of what pushes us forward too.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think one of the things that you're talking about there in terms of the fake it till you make it thing that sometimes you feel pushed to do early when you start off being a founder, and where you guys have gotten to is what I like to call customer driven confidence. So you've got confidence in where you're going, not because you've read a market report or looked on something online or somebody sort of said something. Sure. It's because you've spoken to so many customers, you know in your bones that they need this, they want this, there's no better solution out there. You've got the solution, and you've got the data to back that up. And I think that's where a lot of founders don't really understand that that's actually a thing. If you speak to enough customers, that becomes a thing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really amazing is when you can, at the moment, like we've got, it used to be one person would recommend someone else. So you'd say, how did you hear about us? And they'd say one person. In the last few weeks, it's turned into 3. Like, we noticed such a difference of like 3 people have told me about you, and being able to have their confidence is already there. Like, they're so warm in terms of they're sitting there knowing they want to talk to you. They've reached out to you. They've already heard from someone else how this could transform their lives. And then that process becomes so natural, to the point that when I think about even growing our sales team, it's not sales. Like, it genuinely, you are not selling. You are just sitting and having an authentic conversation with someone. They're telling you a bit about their business. You show Contented and their words in Contented. I mean, I always record their words as we, and then we put it in. And that process is just so
magical.
It's really magical, because you can, I mean, I would trust our customers to sell Contented. If we said, look, Lucy and I are really sick, we're out of action for 2 months, I honestly believe they would step up and sell.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This is another, and I can't believe how many, if the how to build a startup properly bingo card, I can't believe how many things that you guys have hit. But the sales process that you're talking about, you've landed on a great marketing and sales motion for your stage of company, which is find people on LinkedIn. So you've got a great digital footprint on LinkedIn. So when people look up, about Contented and about both of you, it's like there's lots of credibility, there's lots of clarity on the passion, the vision, and what you're doing. So it's like, these are people that I, could see myself doing business with. And then it's really easy once you've got enough, of that trust and credibility built, you want to jump on the phone with them and have a conversation. And that's essentially your sales motion right now. It's high touch. It's kind of not what they tell you at digital internet marketing school. It's do things manually that don't scale. But you get on a conversation, you have a real conversation with a real person, you figure out, how to make that conversation go well, how to add value, how to understand their problems. And that's then driving this critical mass of potential customers, and then eventually people sign up themselves. How did you understand that was the right thing to do? How did you arrive at that? I'm really, really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, again, probably from that consulting side and just going so deep, it felt weird to not do that. It just carried on. Like, we have, I guess, in a way, we are still consultants as well in how we operate. And I think the thing that's changed has gone from being, when we were doing setup costs plus subscription plus workshop, that was heavy, like high touch. So we are moving in this direction, but just slowly. So it would have been easy to go, how do you go from doing that to having a bot that pops up and gives you an induction, or, but the other side of it is that, particularly when I'm doing, like, I guess the sales side, when I'm talking to someone or listening to them, I think of it as customer success. I think about them as already being a customer, and what I need to know about them for them to be successful using it when they're rolling it out to their teams. So that's that mindset of almost we've already got them, rather than I'm spending a lot of time selling and doing this manually. It never feels like that. So that's probably from my brain how I think of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're just about heading up on time. This has been an incredible conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about to help other founders on their journey that you think we should touch on just before we wrap up?
I think the only thing that springs to mind, because from a mental health perspective, I think that's the advocate part in me, but just in terms of the balance and the burnout and the pressure. And I think like a lot of people that we know in this space have really, really struggled with their mental health and their relationships and just everything that's kind of that pressure cooker of building. And I think if they're a solo founder, kind of having someone that's not a co-founder, but someone that is that really, which is what we had when we were solo founders, like people that can actually help you get through this from a mental health perspective, not just a how to build a startup perspective. And I think it can get really lost sometimes, especially that, I mean, I always say around, it's like talking about kids, if you've got a partner at home, for example, our recommendation would probably be don't talk to them about your startup. Just talk about the day, talk about the news, talk about the weather. I don't know, but like having some way of kind of, which I'm sure you see a lot in your programs as well.
Yeah. It's that get out of the fake it till you make it kind of world and just have some people that you can talk to about the reality of what it's like and stay really grounded to keep your mental health in state, because it's a tough journey, isn't it? There's no, even though we've talked about all the great things that you've been doing, we haven't touched on, it's always a roller coaster. You've had bad days and things fall off the rails, and we haven't gone there, but I'm sure there's plenty of those stories too.
There is, but I also think because it's a business, it's so intrinsically linked to finances, and financial stress is some of the worst, so I think you've got to maybe, I think the thing for us is, especially in my last startup, is financially it was a very stressful role, doing a lot of user research and not getting paid and using savings to do that. Saying that, you learn fast doing so, and then you either go back to your day job if it doesn't work out, or you learn quickly how to jump into the next thing. So I think it is a really kind of a quick process to learn about how far you're willing to challenge yourself. And that's not to say you're a winner if you challenge yourself too. I think entrepreneurship is very glamorized. It sounds like the coolest thing to do. We get a lot of press because of it. On LinkedIn, you look like, you're doing an amazing thing in your life, but actually, I think there's just some things that we need to probably clarify from a startup entrepreneur kind of space, that actually it isn't as hunky-dory or as glamorous as it looks on LinkedIn, and that if you're just passionate about a problem, you will end up being this thing called an entrepreneur. But don't go out wanting to be an entrepreneur for that either.
For the glamour side, that's it. Totally. Yeah, great advice. Well, Hannah and Lucy, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be able to chat with you guys. It's been an amazing conversation. It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirk. It's been great.
Now, if people are interested in Contended, particularly the founders that we work with, I encourage you to get on and have a look at what Hannah and Lucy have built. You guys have done an amazing job, and I think one of the challenges in the AI space is, how do you build user interface? How do you build an AI user interface? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. There's no best practice yet. We're all trying to figure this out. I think you guys have done an amazing job. I'd encourage founders to take a look at what you're doing, take a look at your marketing and sales motions. But if you know someone that can genuinely use Contended as a potential customer, is trying to create content, who is your ideal customer?
Ideally, currently in the wealth and financial management space is a really key area for us, but small to medium-sized businesses, with quite a lack of resource internally, who have a lot of conversations. Like, that's the key part. People that spend most of their time in meetings and talking and, brainstorming. These are our key.
And the use cases is to turn those conversations into marketing, or turn them into
reports and analysis, SWOT analysis, risk matrix, user research. So one of our sections is really solely for user research. So key pain points and struggles and motivations. So multiple different outputs per conversation.
And we also do custom templates too. So for small businesses, for a finance firm, they might have a client profile, which is a snapshot, a very detailed snapshot of where that client is in their journey with them, that they can then upload to their CRM. But in that same sort of button click, they'll be able to create a beautiful proposal or summary or a meeting minute based on that conversation, to keep that customer in check as to where they are too. So it's kind of showing that one conversation can be sweated across so many different things. So yeah, we build a lot of custom bespoke, and we take so much care. And I think that's the key part, is even within that client profile, if there's something that's been implied or inferred by AI, that will be highlighted as yellow for the advisors to double check. So we do kind of put ourselves as kind of premium AI as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's incredible. You really need to experience it. And so if anyone's interested, visit your website. You can start your own free trial and play with it yourself, or you can book a meeting and chat with you guys, which, as you've seen today, is an absolute privilege.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. For those founders who might be new and new to LeapSheep, if you're interested in chatting with us, please visit our website. We love to chat to founders, just have a discussion to start with. If you're interested in getting a lot more clarity about the journey of reliably building a successful startup, we have something called a Startup Builder Strategy Session. We'd love to help founders go through that process to get radically better insight into how that can be successful as a founder. With that, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. We've got a great guest lineup that we're putting together for this year. Great founders, great founder supporters that we're bringing together, and we look forward to the next show.